WADR, promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar, 1 o'clock in Lagos. Good afternoon and many thanks for tuning in to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide on WADR.org. Welcome to Newslink, and here are the top stories. Senegal ramps up campaign as supporters of various coalitions flood streets of Dakar to rally for Sunday legislative elections.
We call all the population to go to this election in the calm, with serenity.
In Côte d'Ivoire, latecomers flood registration centers to get onto the voters' register.
Not all
the papers were ready yet. It is only now that I have been able to get my ID card. That's why I was a bit delayed in the process.
Malian authority detains a former National Transitional Council vice president for publicly insulting the foreign head of state, and Sierra Leone eyes share of $16 trillion in global mineral revenues. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is Imo Edit with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining us. Let's begin in Mauritania, where the appeal trial of former President Mohamed Ould Abdelaziz opened on Wednesday. He appeared before the court alongside a dozen senior officials and close associates. As a reminder, he was sentenced at first instance to 5 years in prison for illicit enrichment. His lawyers had appealed the decision. There is more with Abdullahi Hassan.
The trial of the former Mauritanian president opened on Wednesday under high security surveillance. In detention since the start of the case before the courts in January 2023, Mohamed Ould Abdelaziz appeared in good health at the hearing. His supporters who tried to approach the courthouse to show their support were kept away by the police. Mohamed Ould El Ghazouani's predecessor appeared alongside a dozen senior officials and close associates, including 2 former prime ministers, ministers and directors of large companies. They are being prosecuted for, and I quote, illicit enrichment, breach of trust, influence peddling or money laundering, end of quote. The former president of Mauritania from 2008 to 2019 was sentenced at first instance to 5 years in prison in December 2023. His defense had appealed this decision. When he was indicted in March 2021, investigators estimated that Mohamed Ould Abdelaziz had accumulated assets and capital in more than 10 years as head of state at more than 43 billion CFA francs. He had been excluded from the presidential election of June 29 for lack of sponsorship.
Abdullahi Hassan filed a report back here in Senegal as campaign trail of several coalitions, and thousands of the supporters arrived in Dakar ahead of the November 17 legislative elections. Last night, leaders of the Sam Sarkozy coalition and party members rallied on major streets of the capital to convince voters for majority seats in the National Assembly. Despite recent violence and tensions in a campaign season, the coordinator of the inter-coalition with Sam Sarkozy, Hawu Mara, called on voters to be peaceful and avoid any form of violence at the polls. Christopher Ticho has more details in this report.
So the heat is on. Senegal will be going to the polls to elect for themselves all 165 House of Representatives or members to represent their various constituencies in the upcoming elections. And here at the Sam Sarkozy Coalition Center, the atmosphere is charged. Electrifying moment as the Sam Sarkozy coalition, led by Barthélemy Dias and thousands of supporters, swept through all the 5 major districts of Grand Dakar in a caravan, rallying for citizens' vote in the upcoming legislative elections. While the stakes are high in the elections, the coordinator of the inter-coalition with Sam Sarkozy, Ahou Maro, called on voters to be peaceful and eschew any form of violence at the polls.
The atmosphere of the election is so hard, but we call all the population to go to this election in the calm, with serenity.
Ahumaru also said the coalition has major developmental programs that will transform the fortunes of Senegal.
When we go to the assembly, the National Assembly, we have a program to propose many laws for change Senegal in many areas. But we need to have a majority in the assembly. It's necessary.
If Sam Sakadu should win the majority, and with the president also being on the other side, how would the governance of the country be like?
We are going to understand. We are going to understand. It's necessary to understand. And all Senegalese, we are going to work together. It's necessary. Because the Senegal is for all Senegalese people.
Christopher Ticho filed a report in Côte d'Ivoire. A delegation of the African People's Party, PPACI, led by its executive chairman, Dano Jeje Sebastian, was received on Wednesday by the Independent Electoral Commission, CEI. It was at the request of the opposition party that this exchange meeting was held at the headquarters of the electoral umpire. The two parties exchanged views on the issues of the revision of the electoral list and the re-registration of President Laurent Gbagbo in the said list. The opposition party has asked the IEC for a 3-month extension of the registration period. After several closed-door exchanges, the PPACI told the media that it had reached several points of agreement with the IEC, the Independent Electoral Commission. The party of former Ivorian President Laurent Gbagbo wants an extension of the deadline for registration voters on the electoral list. We will bring you the full report in a subsequent bulletin. In the meantime, this is the last week of voter registrations onto the electoral roll in Côte d'Ivoire. Initially scheduled to end on November 10, the operation has been extended by the government until November 17. At the registration centers, latecomers are using the few remaining days to get their names registered on the electoral roll. Our correspondent Alban Ade visited several enrollment centers in Abidjan to gauge the enthusiasm of electorates. His report is voiced by Gustin Colley.
At the Atoban School in the Kokode district, on Oshet, 2 registration agents are diligently working to assist the present applicants. About 15 people, seated in order of arrival, are waiting for their turns. The operation is going smoothly, confirms Jean-Aimé Kwako, a census agent who notes an increase in attendance this past week.
From the beginning, it was a small event, but because we had the end in sight, there was a real sense of urgency. Here we were really welcoming people. Given the extension, people are starting to come in large numbers. We're in the last week, and there are really a lot of people here. Everything is going well in any case.
Kwaku Kofi Joel, a student at the École Normale Supérieure, has just obtained his national identity card and immediately came to register on the electoral list. He welcomes the decision to extend the registration deadline.
Not all the papers were ready yet. It is only now that I have been able to get my ID card. That's why I was a bit delayed in the process. It's something that had been pending for a long time. I'd applied for the card and I came to complete the process. Indeed, the extension has been a good thing for those of us here, and for others, it has also been beneficial.
At the Jean de la Fosse School in Adjamé, the scene is different. The operation is taking place in a classroom with little attendance. Jabate Mohammed, a printer, expresses his satisfaction at being able to register and calls on latecomers to do the same. As a reminder, this ongoing operation is for people who have never registered on the electoral list and for voters who wish to change their voting location or update other personal information. The operation will end next Sunday.
That was Alban Ade's report and voiced by Gustin Colley.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
We head now to Mali, where Issa Kaonjim, a former vice president of the National Transitional Council, has been placed in custody following a complaint from the Higher Council of Communication of Burkina Faso. He is being prosecuted for publicly committing an insult against a foreign head of state and for insult through information systems. He will be tried on February 12. Details from my correspondent in Bamako, Aliu Cham, and voiced by Eche Atisu.
It was on Wednesday morning that Issa Kaonjim was arrested at his home by plainclothes officers before being placed in custody a few hours later. He is being prosecuted for publicly insulting a foreign head of state and for insulting people through information systems. This arrest follows a complaint from the Higher Council of Communication of Burkina Faso. In a debate on the private channel Joliba TV News last weekend, the former vice president of the National Transitional Council had expressed doubts about the attempted coup d'etat against the president of Faso. The images broadcast by RTB, the Burkinabe national television, are, according to him, I quote, a setup aimed at diverting public attention from the real issues, end of quote. Comments described by the Higher Council of Communication of Burkina Faso as, I quote, extremely serious, derogatory, and almost insulting to the Burkinabe people, end of quote. Pending his trial, which is set for February 12, Issa Kaojim will remain in prison, what the host of the show and cause, Mohamed Attaher Halidou, condemns. In a post on social networks, he said, and I quote, clearly, we are all on borrowed time in this country. I am in pain. My indignation is indescribable. Support for Issa Kaojim, end of quote. The journalist, director of information for Joliba TV News, is expected this Thursday before the High Authority of Communication of Mali. He is summoned with the director of the private television channel for a listening session. As a reminder, 2 years ago, the television channel was suspended for 2 months after an editorial on the restriction of freedom of expression in the country.
Aliu Cham in Bamako filed that report, and it was voiced by Eche Atisu. Now, with nearly 70% of Nigeria's population under 30, the British Council has reaffirmed its commitment to empowering Nigerian youth in education and the creative industry. At an event in Lagos, the commercial capital, tagged Amplifying the Voices of Their Future, British Council Country Director Chilufia Besa highlighted the organization's mission to build skills and confidence among young Nigerians. This objective, Besa says, aligns with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, including quality education, gender equality, and reduce inequalities. Usman Mar reports.
Nigeria's education sector faces severe challenges with over 10 million children out of school according to UNICEF, and widespread issues of limited funding, outdated infrastructure, and a shortage of qualified teachers. These obstacles restrict the country's ability to compete internationally and harness its creative talent for economic growth. As part of its 80th anniversary in Nigeria, the British Council underscored its support for young Nigerians, including initiatives like funding for 20 young filmmakers whose works are now featured at international festivals. Chilufia Besa is British Council Country Director in Nigeria.
We have to acknowledge that the Nigerian government has made considerable progress with the formulation of the inclusive education policy. Ours, however, is the responsibility of ensuring that the policy that was recently approved is fully implemented and measured.
On her part, Yetunde Oluwatosin, an education specialist with UNICEF, called for access to education for children irrespective of their background.
There's a lot of emergency situation across the country, and we're having children that have been displaced. So irrespective of where that child lives, irrespective of whether that child is on the move, yes, every child must have that access to quality education. That is how we can build a stronger and more inclusive Nigeria.
Globally, education systems are shifting towards enhancing access to excluded populations. To achieve this in Nigeria, these experts say efforts must be geared towards aligning policy formulation and implementation. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
In Ghana, some renal patients have expressed cautious optimism about the recent promise to offer free dialysis sessions under the country's National Health Insurance Schemes, NHIS. Flag bearer of the New Patriotic Party, NPP, and Vice President of Ghana, Dr. Mahumudu Bawumia, announced on a campaign platform that starting December 1, 2024, kidney dialysis will be provided free of charge for all patients under the NHIS. According to Dr. Bawumia, this is after a successful pilot program that offered free kidney dialysis for patients aged 60 and above, as well as those under 18 years. WDR's Accra correspondent Nadide Tete reports.
The Renal Patients Association of Ghana has welcomed the government's decision to permanently cover dialysis sessions under the National Health Insurance Scheme effective December 1, as announced by Vice President Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. However, the association remains cautiously optimistic, urging that this commitment be genuine and not election-driven.
So it's a welcoming news. We thank God at long last this thing has come to materialize. We really appreciate it. I hope it's not a political joke. That he's a Vice President of the Republic. It shouldn't let it be one of those things.
I was very excited. My fear, because they said the consumables are very costly. So if they are very costly and health insurance is going to take it, I fear today they will say there are no consumables. Tomorrow is off. Today is on. That is my fear about the health insurance.
The Konfanochi Teaching Hospital, CATH, a major referral center, expressed concern over limited resources for implementing the policy. Dr. Thomas Anaba, Executive Director of the African Center for Health Policy Research and Analysis, voiced reservations about the sustainability of adding dialysis sessions to the NHIS.
It is capital intensive, and then we want to ask ourselves whether government is going to find another way of raising more funds into the National Health Insurance Scheme to be able to pay for this, or how is he going to do it?
The National Health Insurance Authority CEO, Dr. Dacosta Wadr, assured that World Bank funding has been secured to support the initiative, dismissing concerns about it being a political gesture.
There shouldn't be any cause of alarm. I think it's a comprehensive program that is going to be rolled out by government, and I believe that the facilities will be able to cope with it. So it's not like people are just going to rush there. It's still going to be the same pilot numbers, but even within the pilot, we're still accepting new patients. So to be honest with you, there shouldn't be any cause of alarm.
For WEDR, Nadidi Teti, Accra.
You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM Dakar. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Senegal ramps up campaign as supporters of various coalitions flood streets of Dakar to rally for Sunday's legislative elections. In Côte d'Ivoire, latecomers flood registration centers to get onto the voters' register. The Malian Authority detains a former National Transitional Council Vice President for publicly insulting a foreign head of state. And still in the news, Sierra Leone eyes a share of $16 trillion in global mineral revenues. We do have the press review, a guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
You can listen to us live on wadr.org and follow live stream on YouTube and Facebook. Now, the Ministry of Health of Liberia has launched a mass medicine administration against the neglected tropical diseases in the country. The launch brought together government ministries and stakeholders at the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf Ministerial Complex in the capital Monrovia to discuss possibilities in creating awareness for the kickoff of the mass medicine administration against the neglected tropical diseases. From Monrovia, Grace Joshua reports.
Speaking at the program, Senator Daba Vabla of Grand Caymont County pointed out the increase in the tropical diseases that poses threats to pregnant women and children, stressing that if the Ministry of Health and partners can focus on creating awareness and providing treatment across the country in line with the agenda of the launch, it will be a gain to improving the healthcare system of the country.
And up to current, Liberia continues to report current cases of some of these entities. Something for which this occasion is indeed important to reflect on our journey to date, look at existing situation, and to have a more robust and stronger fight against entities towards 2030 for a Liberia free of most of these diseases.
Also speaking at the program, Casa Kwali, Program Director for the Tropical Diseases at the Ministry of Health, talked about the danger of tropical diseases that can cause severe disfigurement and disability, including blindness, developmental disability, and malnutrition. These conditions in terms can cause both social and economic challenges in the region where they are most common.
But the medicine is free. We're going to start this week across the country. When you see the people with a stake in the community come to measure you and give you medicine, the medicine is safe. It will help us to get rid of some of the sicknesses.
The mass medicine administration against the neglected tropical diseases will kick off this week and is expected to cover the 15 counties across Liberia. For West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Grace Joshua in Monrovia.
Sub-Saharan Africa is on track to claim over 10% of an estimated $16 trillion in global mineral revenues over the next 25 years, according to Alhaji Mustafa Toure, chairman of Sierra Leone's National Minerals Agency, NMA. Speaking at the Russia-Africa Partnership Forum's first ministerial conference, Toure underscored the enormous potential for economic growth driven by Africa's abundant reserves of critical minerals like copper, nickel, cobalt, and lithium. With about 30% of the world's proven reserves of critical minerals, Sub-Saharan Africa is positioned to lead in the global shift to clean energy. Toure believes that if Africa manages this transition strategically, the region could see its GDP increase by over 12% by mid-century.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
Well, let's head back to Accra as we join Nadia Tete for the newspaper review.
We'll start off with the Daily Graphic newspaper front page. Public split over Parliament's impasse. Majority rates legislature poor, others rate average and good. That's according to a Daily Graphic poll. Other stories here. Border security experts seek effective measures for sub-region, and petroleum hub project will create job opportunities. That's according to the project boss. The final story on the front page of the Daily Graphic newspaper. 2 modern markets inaugurated in Techiman and in Kuranza. Local government minister urges good maintenance. That's it for the Daily Graphic newspaper. To the front page of the Ghanaian Times newspaper, protecting Ghana's democracy, guard free speech and rule of law, Professor Haynes. And Chief Justice orders reopening of 4 courts in the Upper East region. Other stories here. YEA, Fisheries Commission and military partner to train youth in fish farming. And the final story on the front page of the Ghanaian Times newspaper, Ghana earns $800 million through carbon trading. And that's according to President Akufo-Addo. The Daily Guide newspaper, Baumia meets Catholic bishops. Other stories here, non-partisan approach needed to fight terrorism. That's according to the country's national security minister. That will be it for the Daily Guide newspaper. To the Daily Post front page, Lodina Foundation inaugurates yet another maternity and children's ward. Also on the front page, Baumia in another horrendous lie. His advert claims free SHS has benefited 5 million students. Statistics show total enrollment in the past 7 years is 3.1 million students. That'll be it for the Daily Post newspaper. Now to the Chronicle. GRA seizes Nigeria-made explosives at Aplao border. Smugglers assisting state security agencies in their investigation. Other stories here. Agric Minister Brian Echampong promises irrigation setup for drought-prone regions. That's it for the newspaper review segment. It's back to you in the studio.
Many thanks, Nadia Tete there in Accra with the newspaper review.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is a guest.
Well, in this segment, we take you back to our second story from Senegal. As citizens will vote in legislative elections on Sunday, which will determine whether the new administration can gain control over the National Assembly and push through their agenda for reforms. The high stakes in election are threatening to spark renewed unrest following a period of calm. The run-up to the presidential election in March saw some of the worst violence in the country's recent history. Campaigning has grown heated in recent days and comes at a precarious time for the new government, which is navigating a spiraling fiscal crisis that could undermine its ability to deliver on promises to boost the economy and create jobs. Speaking on WDR's debate on the parliamentary elections, former MP Ibrahim Massani reflects on why the tense atmosphere
drives people to want to be an MP or want to be a president. Obviously, it's power, the capacity to decide and the capacity to take action. And secondly, it's suspicions also. I mean, elections in Africa don't always go the right way, the way they should go. So if people always suspect somebody's cheating or rigging the elections here and there, so they all fight. And then passion for politics. Passion for politics dominates and defines a lot of things in Africa.
Well, but today is a passion in politics about personal interest or collective interest?
Passion is collective as well as
personal.
So you can understand that people do fight in groups and sometimes fight it alone. And you can have a fight with just one person because you don't think like him or her, and that can create problems.
Having consultative meetings and discussions with statesmen or concerned citizens, it's more about what forms the opinion on social network. Do you agree with him, Mr. Ibrahim Sani?
Well, my view is we're living in a world where facts matter less and less, and feelings are taking over behind decisions and postures people adopt. And I think if you want to read the history of political life in African countries, I think if you take that into account, you'll see it. I mean, it could be you're from the same region. For instance, I was in 2017 an observer of the elections in Niger, and everyone told me in the area of Niamey, the late Ama Amadou, he died about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, will win, although the ruling party was dominant in the country, area where he came from. So kinship may count, and feeling you like someone or you don't like him. It's people. The level of culture, the cultural education here is such, it's not high enough for people to vote for policies. They trust you because they like you.
So it's more about politics.
Identity politics, not exactly identity politics. They might like you even if you don't belong to their group, kinship group. They might like you. I mean, Sonko is from the south of Casamance, of Senegal, but he's more liked outside Casamance than in Casamance.
That was a former MP Ibrahim Sani speaking during our debate on the parliamentary election on Sunday. Oh yes, thank you for Sport News.
Hello Albert, a warm welcome and thank you for joining us. Sierra Leone were held to a 1-1 draw against Chad in the CAF Africa Cup of Nations qualifier at the Stade Olympique Alassane Ouattara in Abidjan on Wednesday night. In a tense encounter, both teams struggled to secure the 3 points, leaving Sierra Leone's qualification hopes hanging by a thread. The Group G results means title holders Côte d'Ivoire qualify for next year's competition in Morocco as they cannot be overtaken by third place Leon Stars. With 9 points at the top of the group, the Elephants are guaranteed at least the second position in the group, as Sierra Leone, with just 1 match remaining, are 4 points adrift of the current group leaders. Leon Stars, with 5 points from 5 games, remain in third place in Group G, while Chad stays at the bottom with 3 points. This result leaves Sierra Leone's qualification chances uncertain, as they now depend on results elsewhere in the group. A late penalty from Mo Sangare secured a hard-fought 1-0 victory for Liberia over Togo in the Africa Cup of Nations AFCON qualifier at the Samuel Kayondos complex on Wednesday. Despite having a slim chance for AFCON qualification, the Lone Stars fought for pride and delivered the first win of the campaign for the home fans. The victory moves the Lone Stars to third in the group with 4 points, while Togo dropped to the bottom with 2 points. With these results, Liberia earned their first win of the qualifying campaign, boosting team morale under interim coach Thomas Kojo. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
We've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Maudu Juf for the technical support. Well, do connect with us on all of our social media platforms, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram at WADR News, and Facebook, West Africa Democracy Radio, English service. Well, coming up at the bottom of the hour is our flagship environment program, Enviroscope with Abdullahi Hassan. I am Imo Edet. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via